Portrayed by Derek Jacobi with marvelous skill, the Metatron is only in Good Omens for a handful of minutes in both seasons combined, and yet he has a massive impact on the story. In Season 1, it is at least partly his refusal to hear out Aziraphale and his insistence on leaving the portal open that result in Aziraphale's discorporation and the bookshop fire. In Season 2, of course, his interference has an even more direct effect on the story. His offer and subtle threat force Aziraphale to make a choice that is really no choice at all. Season 2 ends with everyone's heart broken, including the audience. Considering the lack of a clear singular antagonist through the majority of Good Omens and the outcome of Season 2, I think it's quite natural for viewers to place that part on the Metatron. So let's explore his adversarial role and try to answer the question, is the Metatron the villain? Before we dive in, let's get this out of the way. The Metatron in Good Omens is not Enoch and was never a human. This is confirmed. All right, here we go. For about half of his on-screen time, the Metatron is only a floating head, clearly referencing the Wizard of Oz, a man who abused his power and in doing so caused harm, even if he had good intentions. A notable possible parallel right off the bat. For the other half of the show, the Metatron appears in human form. Let's take a look at his human clothes. There's no doubt that there's some color coding going on in Good Omens, though it's far more nuanced than black equals evil and white equals good. After all, H.E.R wears beige, and he's undeniably nasty, whereas Crowley wears almost entirely black and is, at his core, at least a little bit of a good person. When in his human form, the Metatron wears this dark coat. I'd call it charcoal gray, and he also has some very basic dark slacks. No other angels wear anything quite so dark. Most wear beige, though the archangels wear a light gray, and a few, like Aziraphale and sometimes Muriel, wear white. Are these colors alone enough to rouse suspicion? They are quite out of the ordinary for an angel, but the Metatron is no ordinary angel. He's the voice of God. Still, let's put a pin in this potential clue and keep digging. His tie has an interesting pattern. Although it's difficult to be 100% certain, it does appear to be a quatrefoil, which is a four-lobed design common in many cultures, but prominent in Gothic through Renaissance architecture and art. In Christianity, it tends to represent the four evangelists of the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. A picture may be worth 1,000 words, but we can really best judge a character by their actions. So let's take a look at those to see if we can understand his character and motivations better. He first appears in Season 1, Episode 4, when Aziraphale prays to a higher authority, seeking a response. When the portal glows, he says he needs to speak to the Almighty, and the Metatron's floating head appears. The Metatron insists that what is said to him is said to the Almighty, although we don't have any sort of confirmation of that. When Aziraphale says he thinks that he can prevent the war, the Metatron informs him that the point is to win the war, not to avoid it. This is almost exactly what Gabriel told Aziraphale earlier during his jog.
We can fight, and we can win.
But there doesn't have to be a war.
Of course there does, otherwise how would we win it?
Which is something else I'd like to put a pin in. In Season 2, the first time we see the Metatron is in Episode 6, after Crowley opens Gabriel's file, when they get to the part about the trial. Note that while all the other angels' heavenly displays include their head, neck, and shoulders, the Metatron's remains only his head, no hint of a body. The Metatron says Gabriel will not be cast into hell and explains,
"For it to happen twice makes it look like there is some kind of institutional problem."
Which there isn't.
He then goes on to explain Gabriel's punishment for his disobedience will be erasure of his memory and demotion. The memory wipe is described as a kindness, as if demotion is somehow worse than losing all of what makes someone someone. As cruel and tyrannical as this punishment is, the other angels are all on board, even Aziraphale, who seems to be in charge of performing the actual memory wipe, yet is painted as a more sympathetic angel. Well, more sympathetic than Michael and Uriel anyway. The next time we see the Metatron, he's in this human form, in line outside the coffee shop, and it looks to me like he's sucking on something. It's such an odd detail, but it's clearly there. Why? Well, I think it's because it answers an important question about the Metatron, and that is, does the Metatron lie? This topic, honesty and dishonesty, truth and lies, and how they affect the characters and story in Good Omens, definitely deserves its own deep dive, which I do plan to do, but let's discuss what it means specifically for the Metatron. The Metatron uses a host of psychological techniques to manipulate Aziraphale at the end of Season 2. One of them is building trust and relatability. When he hands Aziraphale the coffee and urges him to drink it, he says,
I've ingested things in my time, you know.
But has he? Most of the beings in the room don't recognize the Metatron in his human form when he enters the bookshop. As far as we can tell, none of them has ever seen him as anything but a big giant floating head. From this interaction, I think we're meant to infer that this is the Metatron's first visit to Earth in an earthly body, and therefore he's never had the opportunity to ingest anything before. Shax has just shamed Aziraphale for eating his big human meals. In Season 1, Gabriel has shamed Aziraphale similarly, calling food gross matter. The Metatron not only doesn't shame him, he relates to the experience, and it's not a lie because just moments earlier, the Metatron has indeed ingested something that allows him to state this fact and have it be technically true while being utterly deceptive at the same time. Lying is a thing in Good Omens. Shadwell lies, Newt lies, Crowley lies, Aziraphale lies, Michael lies, all for varying reasons. Honesty is in no way a measure of a character's moral alignment. So why go out of the way to show us that the Metatron does not technically lie? I think the point is that in his black and white thinking, the Metatron believes it's important to his angelic nature to be technically honest. And the reason this is important for the story, for Aziraphale and for us, the audience, is that it shows us that the Metatron does not lie, not technically speaking. But he does deceive, he does manipulate. He can twist a truth to his own ends, and we must understand that the characters and the audience have to be very careful with what truth we take from his words. I know that this opens this can of worms.
With a dash of almond syrup. With a hefty jigger of almond syrup.
But I'm sticking to the idea that he can exaggerate but not outright lie. There had to be some almond syrup in the coffee for him to say there was any almond syrup in the coffee. So back to this. When the Metatron says he's ingested things, he's telling the truth, but what he wants Aziraphale to hear is that the Metatron isn't disgusted by his behavior, that he even relates positively to the behavior, and therefore to Aziraphale. But none of this is explicitly said, it's all subtext, and most likely, none of it is true, it's manipulative. We'll add both of these traits to our pinned list. And speaking of manipulative, let's quickly list some of the many ways the Metatron manipulates Aziraphale in the final 15. First, he protects Aziraphale from Michael's threats. Second, he shows displeasure at all the other angels in the room, speaking to them harshly. He insinuates that Michael, Uriel, and Seraquiel might be in trouble and outright insults Muriel's intelligence, something I think Aziraphale values highly about himself. Once he dismisses the other angels, he approaches Aziraphale with a smile. Next, the offer of the coffee itself is a big deal, as it shows implicit approval of Aziraphale's love of worldly things. It also mimics the behavior of a trusted companion, Crowley, who offers Aziraphale such worldly pleasures often. Fifth, he uses Britishisms, a lot of them, something he does not do at all during his conversation with Nina while purchasing the coffee, or during his conversation with Aziraphale at the portal in Season 1, though Aziraphale manages to slip in quite a few himself.
In a jiffy. 2 shakes of a lamb's tail.
The Metatron crams all of these into his conversation while softening Aziraphale up to ask him to go outside for a chat.
Utter balderdash, I mean complete piffle. You, back to heaven, spit spots, not another word. I think we need to have a bit of a chin wag. With a hefty jigger of almond syrup. Yes, I jolly well hope so.
He flatters Aziraphale, first by asking his opinion on Gabriel's successor in heaven, and then listing off Aziraphale's positive qualities while offering him Gabriel's old position. And the flattery, while skirting the truth, are not lies. When this all fails, the Metatron pulls out his ace in the hole. Number 7, he offers Aziraphale a supposedly safe way to be with Crowley. Last, and certainly not least, inside that offer is a threat. One Aziraphale understands as a threat that the current state of the relationship is not safe. The Metatron keeps up this cheerful charade while he sends Aziraphale in to speak to Crowley, and afterwards, when he's reassuring Aziraphale that the bookshop and everything will be well tended in his absence, all the way to the elevator when he drops the second coming news bomb. But it is a charade. Derek Jacobi does a fantastic job of conveying the Metatron's real feelings, which include disdain for Crowley and nervousness about Aziraphale's choice, running high just under the surface. Even this interaction with Muriel outside the coffee shop shows a cheerful facade, while the real him underneath is poking through. His real personality, which we see in his other interactions, is condescending and calculating. So, we've got his personality and behavior down. We can see what he did to accomplish his goals, but what are his goals? What is his motivation? Clearly, he means to break up Crowley and Aziraphale, perhaps because together they are a threat to Heaven's plans, or perhaps because he really does need Aziraphale to help enact the Second Coming. Perhaps both. But I want to look deeper. What is his personal motivation to do any of that? Do we see any evidence that it's to keep his current power or gain even more power, as we see with Michael, Uriel, Shax, and even Furfur? I would say no. Interestingly, nothing about his behavior speaks to that sort of grasping or selfishness. Is it for some other gain, to exercise his own personal freedom in some way, as we see with Gabriel, Beelzebub, and Crowley? I would also say no. It seems to me that he is acting as he believes it is his job to act. He's fulfilling the function for which he was created. We don't know to what level, if any at all, God communicates with him, but the great plan still exists, and he's going to keep following it unless he's told otherwise. An awful lot of harm can be, and has been, committed in the name of good, in the belief of doing good, in the name of the greater good, and that seems to me to be his motivation. Every villain is a hero in his own mind. From what we can infer, the big boss, God, has left the building, is out on holiday. She's taking a really long siesta. Whatever the case, she's not around right now. There's no evidence of any foul play regarding this absence. She's simply playing an ineffable game of her own devising and has left her voice, the Metatron, in charge, with nothing but a millennia-old blueprint to follow. We could probably spend an hour discussing the definitions of good and evil and even the existence of it. That doesn't strike me as either particularly fun or even particularly helpful in this case. Things which were asserted as good and things which were asserted as evil have both been shown to be neither of those things in the show, and most exist in some gray area in between. H.E.R, Ligger, and the Nazis are shown to be irredeemably bad, but that isn't the case for most characters or groups of characters in the show. Neither are actions portrayed as black and white. Intentions and outcomes don't always match up. Crowley gave humans knowledge which was presumed to be bad, but it led to the ability to tell right from wrong and take action based on that knowledge. Aziraphale gave them a sword, his intention being that they might protect themselves, but in practice, of course, that leads to violence and bloodshed. Repeatedly, characters are presented with difficult moral dilemmas. Crowley and Aziraphale have faced some very difficult choices where they became aware of the consequences of their actions, the real price paid by others. Many characters in Good Omens have not faced such a dilemma or have not recognized the dilemma when faced with it. Let's look at some extremely moral questionable behavior in other characters. Aziraphale devoutly prays for heaven's will to be done, meaning the destruction of all life on earth. Muriel cheerfully found everything to be in order when reading the permit concerning God's bet with Satan that allowed for the killing of Job's children. Beelzebub tried to have Crowley destroyed repeatedly, and Gabriel was truly awful. He was condescending, callous, and even cruel, all in the name of following the great plan. He did try to destroy Aziraphale, and he was very much an ass about it. He's fully on board with human death, from killing Job's kids to killing all of humanity. Gabriel, as Jim, finally became aware of a dilemma he was causing, the danger he posed to Aziraphale, and the cruelty with which he used to treat others, and he was truly remorseful. He even tried to take responsibility for those actions. He would have jumped out the window, though Crowley stopped him. He did give himself up to the demons. As Jim, he gained something he'd never had the opportunity to learn as Gabriel: empathy. The Metatron has never faced a moral dilemma of this nature. He's never been shown the suffering and consequence of heaven's actions on earth, not in a way he can understand. His actions align with God's will, and therefore he's doing good. However, what we must recognize is that belief and reality do not always line up. Following any belief dogmatically without thinking about the consequences of that belief and the actions that stem from it can lead to enormous harm. So here's our list, our clues to the Metatron. His clothing is distinctly darker than any other angel. He wants the war to happen so that heaven can win it. He is technically truthful while simultaneously being very manipulative. He's condescending and calculating while maintaining dogmatic belief in the great plan. One of the reasons I find this list so interesting is that many of these qualities also fit other characters. The dogmatism fits pretty much all of the other angels and demons, including those we love, like Muriel, and excepting only Crowley and Aziraphale. The same seems to hold true for winning the war instead of avoiding it, and the truthful bit probably fits all of the angels at least. Certainly we've seen other angels and demons attempt to be manipulative, including but not limited to Shax and Michael. Their skill levels vary pretty wildly though. The condescension fits Gabriel to a T, Uriel and Michael, and probably Sandalphon. As a matter of fact, this list very much matches Gabriel in Season 1. The only thing really unique to the Metatron is the clothes. So yes, I think the clothes matter. They don't make him evil, but they do make him unique. The colors are interesting, dark on the outside with a white shirt underneath. On the one hand, it's kind of ominous. On the other hand, better than any other angel, he picked an outfit that really does blend right into modern-day London, possibly a sign that he's very good at masking his true nature, that although he's technically honest, he is skilled at obfuscation. What do you make of his clothing? So based on this, can we say he's the villain of Season 2? In the same way that Gabriel was a villain in Season 1, I would say yes. Through a combination of dogmatic belief and privileged power, the Metatron did some damage and is aiming to do quite a lot more damage with the Second Coming. But as we saw when Gabriel left, removing the powerful person at the head did not remove the villain. There was actually competition to fill that power vacuum immediately, and both Michael and Uriel would have been at least as bad as Gabriel. The Metatron is like the acting CEO of a megacorporation. If he were swept out of the way, another would only take his place because the Metatron isn't the real problem. He's a symptom. The real pervasive villains of both seasons are the institutions of heaven and hell. It is an institutional problem. Will the Metatron continue to be the villain in Season 3? That's a tricky question, isn't it? A one-note, wahahaha, Cruella de Vil Disney-type villain is probably not something we'll see. That doesn't fit what audiences want in a villain today, nor does it fit the complex moral themes and structures that both Neil and Terry like to explore. One of the main story arcs in Season 2 was Gabriel's redemption through his experiences as Jim, which was of course initiated by finding kinship for the first time in his existence with Beelzebub. In Season 3, the Metatron could be similarly redeemed, or at least come to see the error of his ways, perhaps through the actions of one of our main characters, if not through a direct peer. It could be very satisfying to see him change through the humility, kindness, and sacrifice of someone we all love. Or he could serve as a counterpoint to Jimbriel, stubbornly remaining dogmatic in the face of evidence that contradicts his belief system, the captain going down with the sinking ship of heaven. But even if he does remain a villain, unwilling or unable to see the truth and learn the moral lessons needed for personal growth and change, his story would then serve as a warning. I think that the larger villains, the organizations of heaven and hell, will need to be confronted somehow for the show to have any meaningful resolution. They will need to be changed from the inside or perhaps destroyed entirely. I had this really kooky idea while I was doing research for this video. I know that Neil has said that Crowley miracles his clothes into existence, which does indicate that maybe material objects can be created out of nothing, but we really only see miracles alter objects and move or teleport objects. So where did the whatever it is the Metatron is sucking on come from? If he just now arrived from the lift and got in line, there isn't a place on Wickaber Street for him to easily find what I think we can reasonably assume is a hard candy. Well, actually, there is something sitting right outside the coffee shop, only feet from the Metatron, that has some hard candy in it. And with all the implications this comes with, my mind asked,
Was that a travel suite?
what do you think? Will the Metatron remain dogmatically villainous, unable to see the error of his ways, or will he find some sort of redemption through lived experience, as other characters have? Will heaven and hell be fixed, destroyed, or something else? I'm super interested in your opinions on this, as it is more speculation and analysis than theory, so please do share your ideas with me in the comments below. And what does all of this mean for God, or really the absence of God in Season 2, and possibly Season 3? Was she really absent? That's the topic I plan to discuss next time, so if you find this sort of deep dive into Good Omens interesting, I do hope you stick around. I have also got another News Bites social media update in the works. Some of you may have heard I had a little injury last month, and I did take some time off to recover, so thank you for being patient. You see, some ninjas came into my house, and I had to fight them on the basement stairs. Skilled combatant that I am, even outnumbered, I drove them off, but not before sustaining a slightly broken ankle. Don't worry, no actual ninjas were injured in the invention of that story, and the dresser I was moving is okay too. If you'd like to meet other like-minded Good Omens fans to chat with and join us in fun activities, check out our Discord. My patrons are all awesome. We had our very first Patreon live Q&A, and that was a lot of fun. I plan to start doing these monthly as long as we have even a few people interested in chatting. All of these wonderful folks keep up my spirits when the ninjas get me down. Once again, we've made it to the end. So to you, my lovely viewers, who keep showing up to hear me blather on about this marvelous world, what can I say but thanks for watching?